Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the great introduction. If you didn't guess by the branding, I'm from Scroll. I am Daniel Helm. I lead the developer relations team there. And this talk is called The Art of Technical Communication Inside and Outside of Crypto. Very, very happy to be here talking on this subject. Also, so glad to be in Denver, which is close to my home of Oklahoma, where most conferences are not very close to my home of Oklahoma. Yes, if you are here for Mastering Crypto Technical Communication, The Art of the Scroll by Sandy Peng, unfortunately, you get me instead. But I've put together a talk that I think is a bit of a spiritual successor to her talk on similar themes. And in my role in developer relations, thinking a lot about technical communication and what it looks like to bridge external audiences with what we're trying to do at Scroll. So this talk is a bit of talking shop, right? I'm not going to be talking about Scroll and how great of a ZK EVM we have or how great our rollup is, even though it is great. Really thinking about marketers, growth people, DevRel, and how you can better communicate with folks interested in your technologies. And for folks that are researchers or developers, maybe there's some tips in here for you to better communicate what you are doing. Background on me. Why am I up here speaking? Well, I've been doing developer relations in crypto for about 3 years here now. This is a cute photo of me back at ETHDenver 2021, which was fully online. But before getting into crypto full-time as a DevRel, I was actually teaching and creating artwork. So I was making art about technology and making artwork using technology. And if you think working for a ZK rollup is niche or obscure or isolating, try showing new media artwork in the state of Oklahoma. It takes a lot of attention into who you're talking to and what you're doing. So I would be doing things like going into architecture colleges and doing site-specific artwork that would be catered to folks thinking about architecture, students, academics, practitioners, and thinking about, okay, how can I talk about AI in this context? How can I let them physically interact with the latent space of a model, thinking about what a building is and how that might maybe affect their roles in the future? Or it might be bringing Bitcoin into an art gallery and saying, who knows what I'm saying here? I might be talking about mining and educating folks. I might be making a comment on energy consumption and proof of work. I might be talking about the state of crypto and who knows what I might be saying there. Or I might just be exploiting the fact that I have free electricity and internet to mine Bitcoin in the middle of an art gallery. But through these experiences, right, I think well before I actually became a DevRel, I was doing things and honing in on ideas. And these are the 3 that I decided this morning to bring to you. Know your audience, bring them something of value, and always know that you're never just doing one thing. All right, know your audience. This might sound like marketing like 101, right? A very simple idea. But in crypto, it's actually more complicated than it might seem. There's rabbit holes to go down. So these were slides from Sandy's presentation. She said, she was looking at knowing your audience and thinking about and Scroll, how we have ZK researchers, ETH researchers. We have these concentric circles of identities to try to understand and communicate with. Or maybe you can think about the crypto subcultures of degens and builders and researchers, right? These are all mental models for understanding your audience. Or maybe you're interested in metrics. Maybe you want to look at the developer report and say, this many people are building on this, and here's the new ones, and here's the ones that have left. Or maybe this triangle is how one DevRel on my team breaks down thinking about things, is everything in crypto is a balance between ethos, diplomacy, and degeneracy, or incentives. Or maybe you just want a platonic ideal, right? You want something simple, straightforward, something that's got a manifesto attached to it, and then you can go just label your audience as cypherpunks. But whatever you're doing, know your audience. Have a mental model. Know who you're communicating with. And once you know that, your job is to meet them where they're at, right? You don't want to be going above them. You're not trying to impress them. You want to meet them where they're at and bring them something of value. And the last item I have for this is that you want to make sure that you also account for who you are in relationship to them, right? I'm not a degen, and when I'm talking to degens, I have to acknowledge that. I have to acknowledge that I'm not a researcher, but know still what I can bring them and bring that audience. When knowing those audiences and knowing those mental models, right? Like, as developer relations, people want to ask me about developers. Well, developers aren't a monolithic thing, right? Someone with 20 years experience living in SF is going to be very different than a first-year student in India, and we have to acknowledge that in the types of things that we're making and how we engage with them, and understanding that our values and what's important to us might differ from theirs, and we just need to acknowledge that. So here's an example from our work at Scroll, right? We have talks talking about zero-knowledge proofs. On the left, you see us describing zero knowledge to folks that have no idea what zero knowledge is. If I say ZK, their eyes gloss over. But we still want to make that accessible to them, make them feel empowered when we're talking about this technology. But this is quite different than the slide on the right, where we're talking about ZK EVM circuits and the stack and execution traces, right? These are different audiences. You want to know what you're doing. You want to cater to the right audience for the right moment. Perhaps a more fun example here. Recently, we had a lot of great contributors spam our GitHub repos in the hopes of achieving an airdrop. It created quite a commotion a little bit internally and then on Twitter and in other spaces. And having kind of like the awareness and confidence to just embrace the chaos is always a ploy to be able to communicate to folks your values and what you understand about the people interested in your project, even if sometimes it can be painful. All right, next up here, bring your audience something of value. Okay, so one great way to provide value is don't shill. Don't show up and try to sell developers or researchers on something. No one wants to be sold to. We in tech are chronically skeptic, especially in crypto. If you want your developers to run the other way, try to sell them something. Instead, give knowledge, give ideas, give head starts, give non-trash swag, give money, whatever it takes to build these relationships. You are there to provide and help these developers and the people interested in the technology. The next one I have on here is pretty simple. Don't waste people's time, right? You know, I think I put this on there thinking about the DevRels who might show up at a hackathon, right? And they have this brand new project and they've never even tested it in production. Don't waste people's time. If your shit doesn't work, don't waste people's time. If you're just there to sell them on something and not actually help them, don't waste people's time. Lastly, communication is always a relationship. You know, you want to open up, you want to let people get a read on what is valuable to you, what your ethos is, what problems you're solving, and you want to make sure that they understand that you are speaking to real folks with real needs and that you're having a conversation for a reason. So again, showing some of the work that we do at Scroll. Back in our pre-alpha testnet days in late 2022, we had largely an audience of developers, or largely an audience of researchers and some developers that were interested in our technology, but they couldn't quite grok it yet, right? There wasn't very much out there providing support for people to understand this emerging field of zero-knowledge cryptography. And so we spent a lot of time, you know, not just looking at Scroll's architecture and all the engineering trade-offs that come when you design a rollup and try to scale Ethereum, but also just publishing accessible pieces on KZG, right? Like, people need to know how these things work, and hopefully these resources provide value long after a pre-alpha testnet has changed. Another example I like here is something that is from our DevRel team. Ahmed has a blog, right? This article, ETHDenver, start developing on blobs today. You can go through this entire article. It doesn't mention Scroll once, right? That's not what he's interested in doing here. He's interested in providing a need. He knows his audience is interested in these emerging technologies, these new primitives. They might get used on Scroll, they might not, doesn't really matter. If you try to look for Scroll, you won't find it, but you will find it right up there in the corner, right? We have Noir on Scroll, a different article. By allowing developers to see that they can deploy Noir deployments onto Scroll, we sneak this in, I guess, in a way. But also, if you're not familiar, Noir is made by Aztec, who in any other industry would be labeled as a competitor to us, right? Doesn't really matter. We're providing values to developers. What they want to know, we're there to give them. And the last item I had on there was, you are never doing just one thing. So you can't speak to one audience at a time. I talked about how this talk was for professionals, right? I have no idea what this audience is. Everything that you're doing, everything you're putting out into the world is not just being seen by the people that you want it to be seen by or that people have good intentions for you. You can't speak to just one audience at a time, and it's going to be taken in different ways by different folks. And just keep that in mind in how you're crafting your message and how you're communicating. Another way of phrasing this maybe is everybody's watching, but not really. If they're already watching, you're doing something right and well done because people care. Another item here I have is everything has second order effects. Every kind of engagement you do, you might think of it as doing one thing, and it's going to have other ramifications, right? Us doing education about KZG shows to folks that we're invested in other things, right? That is a second order effect. We might say we're doing education, but we're also doing branding, we're doing marketing, we're communicating who Scroll is, who we value, what we value. Lastly, relationships are complex, and they're also built over time. So be consistent with your output, be consistent with your identity, be consistent with your values, but also don't be too worried if you mess up a few times, right? You're going to mess up, embrace it, learn from it, and just acknowledge it. So again, object lesson from some of the work that Scroll has done. We have been going all over the world doing events like these. And one of the things we started doing is bringing food items as swag. So we have macaroons in Paris. We have hot sauce in Austin, Texas. We have donuts in Berlin, and we have mooncakes in Token 2049 in Singapore, right? And so on the one hand, it's just swag. We're giving out swag, right? But what are the other things that we're doing, right? What are these second order of effects? We're commenting on how other people approach swag. We're giving something to someone that is not immediately disposable in the same way as a shitty t-shirt. It's disposable in that you get to enjoy it, you get to eat it, and you get to keep growing with it. But we're also talking about locality, right? Part of Scroll's ethos, part of what we really want to do is make sure that we connect with local communities and that we understand the global needs for Ethereum and what it is to connect with those communities. And so this is a tip of the hat to that, right? Translating things is a tip of the hat to that. But it also works the other way, right? We're also acknowledging that a lot of the people that descend on Denver or descend on Berlin or descend in Singapore are not of that place. We are kind of temporary, transient tourists trying to understand our place there. And this is a way to acknowledge the local culture and the local folks. All right, so let's think about an object lesson here. How can we put some of this into practice and have a case study? I was going to present a lot of my favorite marketing ploys and product marketing and vision marketing in the space, but I thought a more fun one might be to look at where we are right now, ETHDenver. I am standing on a stage kind of talking about Scroll, but kind of not talking about Scroll, right? And what am I doing? I'm not teaching you about Scroll or what we do. I'm trying to imbue things into folks. Maybe, right? Know your audience. I started off this talk saying, hey, I'm talking to all you Web3 professionals in marketing and growth out there. I'm well aware I'm on the Biddle Hub stage. Most of you are not that. Most of you are maybe folks showing up randomly from Denver. And so implicitly, I might be saying one thing, but I actually know that there are various audiences watching me right now, and this content is valuable to all of them, right? Because I'm trying to bring something of value. I'm trying to let normal users understand that in the circus of ETHDenver, everyone here is doing marketing efforts, right? All of this is marketing. It's all games. But what you can do with that is understand who are building these things, why we're building them, and hopefully you can start to almost do your own research, right? Not just in a technical capacity, but understand who these people are, what they're trying to achieve, why they're here, and why they're trying to talk to you and why they may or may not be wasting your time. And lastly, you're never doing just one thing. I am not doing one thing by giving this talk. I can have the multiple goals of both giving tips and tricks to folks and maybe encouraging DevRel to keep doing God's work and bringing complex technology to folks that it hasn't been prepared for yet. But also, again, I really hope to increase the media literacy, if you will, of folks in the space and let them know that as they're showing up to these events, you can keep asking hard questions, and you should ask hard questions. And the same cynicism that the external world brings to crypto, it's fair to bring to every single project out there. So I am Daniel Helm. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And have a good rest of your day.